The story begins within a game house where several people were remarking that once again, a player known as Kangchi had secured first place on the game's newest map. Despite the map having been released only recently, he had already ascended to the pinnacle of the rankings. The game, titled Dungeoncraft, allowed participants to design their own dungeons. Even so, Kangchi consistently held the top spot. One of the players questioned how he managed this feat repeatedly, while another insinuated that he must be utilizing automated programs or bots to play for him. At this juncture, Kangchi himself overheard these comments and fell silent. His friend also overheard and asked why Kangchi dedicated so much time playing at the LAN house when he evidently possessed sufficient funds to play from his own residence. Kangchi simply replied that he enjoyed the food there and that there wasn't much else he could do about it. Without much preamble, he announced that he had achieved first place once more and that the others should prepare themselves. This prompted another player to comment that he spoke as if the achievement were effortless, adding that he genuinely sounded like a bot. Kangchi mused that, technically, they weren't mistaken. His sole source of amusement was playing that game and conquering all the maps. Later, as he bid farewell to his friend, he reflected that if anyone were to ask him about his deep obsession with the game, the answer would be simple. In the real world, he could not control anything at all. Within the game, however, everything was possible, even trivial actions like relocating inefficient power poles, which in reality could not even be dragged, but in the game could be deleted with a mere click of the mouse. While engrossed in these thoughts, a truck nearly struck him in the street. He realized that this reality was truly brutal because even a truck could not be removed at his whim, unlike in the game. Fortunately, the driver managed to brake in time, and he avoided being run over. Although the driver yelled and questioned if Kangchi was deranged for stepping into the truck's path, Kangchi simply pointed to the traffic light, which was green for him. The driver appeared bewildered, not understanding when the light had changed. Kangchi felt more frustrated about existing in a world where he couldn't alter anything as he did in the game. If he could rewrite everything, he would have fashioned a world exactly as he desired. Just then, an iron beam broke loose from a nearby construction site and fell directly onto a little girl who was playing carelessly nearby. Although he considered it perilous and even foolish for her to play in such a location, Kangchi felt that perhaps, in that moment, he could control something. He rushed to save the child, believing he could at least command his own body. He threw himself in front of the beam and pushed the girl out of the way. He ended up being crushed by the structure, grimly realizing that this was truly harsh reality, or even attempting to do the right thing incurred a severe cost. Everything went dark, and he found himself in an entirely different space, as if floating on an astral plane. He felt as though he might have been swallowed by a black hole, yet he didn't feel dead. A mysterious voice spoke to him, and soon an immense, heavenly-looking figure possessing 3 eyes appeared. She informed him that the time had come for him to confront reality. Kangchi had no understanding of this place called Oblivion. The celestial being explained that death was merely a vehicle for reincarnation and that he would receive a second chance to regain his memories. Kangchi comprehended nothing and pleaded for simpler explanations. The being simply commanded him to open his eyes. At that instant, a peculiar force impacted his mind, and he suddenly awoke in another body. He felt utterly desperate inside a solitary chamber that resembled a castle. He approached a mirror and saw the reflection of a demon. That monstrous image was himself. He was shocked because despite believing he had died, he was now present in another body with a new appearance. He couldn't tell if he was in the afterlife, inside a game, or subjected to some anime-like prank. Everything felt so real it was impossible to believe it was merely a dream. He resolved that he needed to ascertain his location. He quickly recognized the place as an ancient castle with medieval architecture. Suddenly, a new voice emerged, asking him how long he intended to remain there, muttering to himself. Then, he was simply pierced through the chest by a blade. Barely able to react, he merely spat up blood as he watched the maniacal woman who had done it laugh at him as if it were inconsequential. She looked at him with disdain, as if relishing the pain she was inflicting. Kella, the name is given shortly after, so continuing with he for Kangchi in the new body for now, thought that it genuinely hurt because she had forcibly and cruelly penetrated his form. He tried to understand her motive, and the girl coolly replied that she hated him, which was why she was attempting to eliminate him, plain and simple. She was already preparing to kill him permanently. Just then, someone disarmed the woman with a precise strike. It was a long-haired man with a whip, and the surprised woman demanded why Tarm was there again. Tarm faced her and stated she shouldn't act that way because Kella was her own brother. Kella was confused, wondering who this man was. Tarm then calmly approached him, called him Kella, and remarked that he was being provoked by Caldera once more. He then offered him something to drink which appeared to be a healing potion. Kella, believing it was a potion, took a sip, but as soon as the liquid descended his throat, he spat it all out, feeling a burning sensation from head to toe. It was too hot to be an ordinary potion, it was poison. Caldera watched him passively and asked if he was going to die, making her objective clear. Tarm analyzed the situation and commented that Kella appeared to be in pain but, unfortunately, didn't seem to be dying, declaring the recipe a failure. Kella, amidst his agony, questioned why they were doing this to him and why he had to suffer so profoundly. Just then, the castle gates opened. The Demon King, Helson, was returning from a hunt for heroes. Caldera and Tarm, sensing his presence, inquired if their father had returned. Upon hearing this, Kella wondered about the meaning of father and was shocked to realize that the Demon King was referred to as his father. The king entered, demanding why he was hearing such a racket emanating from the residence. Kella looked at him, still unable to believe that the man was truly the Demon King. Caldera attempted to justify herself by blaming Kella, but the king accepted no excuses. He seized both children by the neck, declaring their actions a humiliation. As screams and groans of pain echoed through the Demon King's castle, the two siblings knelt and pleaded with their father for forgiveness. Kella, observing everything, began to question if those two were genuinely his brothers and if that implied he was the offspring of that monster. The king then proclaimed that within his castle, he would only tolerate hearing two specific sounds: the birth of a formidable demon and the honorable death of an enemy. In a fit of rage, he simply stomped on Kella's head, leaving all three of them near death. Kella thought he had truly been reincarnated into another world, and to make matters worse, he was the Demon King's own son. That seemed like the most dreadful possible fate, and he lamented that, of all people, it had to be him. At that moment, he recalled a particular day with his mother. He had been weeping because he had injured himself after Seldora had poked him in the eye with a fork. His mother, instead of comforting him, merely commented that it must have hurt considerably. Kella also informed her that Tarm had poisoned his meal. His mother responded by stating that in such a case, he should retaliate in the same manner, as that was how a true demon would behave. Kella countered that if he did that, he would end up dying. His mother declared he must kill them before he was killed. She claimed that his father had slain his own siblings at the age of 12 to become the Demon King. Her point was unmistakable: if anyone attempted to kill him, he must kill them first. She then took a dagger and plunged it into her son's abdomen, saying this was how a demon acted and asking him if he understood, while he cried in pain from the wound inflicted by his own mother. Then, Kella awoke in his bed, breathing heavily. His personal attendant, Rin, asked if he was all right. Kella realized that the body in which he had been reincarnated carried the memories of the original Kella and that despite all the suffering, his body had already completely regenerated. Apparently, he possessed very advanced regenerative abilities. Ren commented that he had been asleep for a long time and that it was almost time for the family meal. Kella looked at her and thought, based on the old memories, that as a child, Kella was very timid compared to his other siblings. He was perpetually looked down upon, and even Run, his own maid, was the one who selected the clothes he should wear to gatherings, yet she never personally dressed him. Kella even mentioned hearing that his brother's maid helped dress him, and Ren replied by suggesting that in that case, he could dress her too. Kella understood this was mere sarcasm and decided that, fine, he would dress himself another time. On another occasion, Ren assigned one of her tasks to him, instructing him to clean the deck. Yet another day, she slept in his bed, and the following day, she replaced herself with a doll to work. Kella began to question how the original Kella, the owner of this body, had allowed himself to be subjected to such disrespect by a simple servant. Now, Kangchi was in control and no longer intended to tolerate this type of humiliation. The previous Kella had been pushed around, scorned, and treated poorly throughout his life, and Kangchi realized that his existence in this world wasn't significantly different from his past life. Ultimately, the vulnerable always perish. At the family meal, he arrived late, and his father commented on it in a cold, commanding voice. Kella felt the oppressive weight of the Demon King's presence. After all, this was the Demon King, and there was a clear reason he was feared by everyone. He quickly offered his apologies and took his seat. Seldora's response was to plunge a knife directly into his leg. The pain was real, sharp, and even Seldora's maid chuckled, treating it as a joke. Seldora remarked that he didn't seem very energetic and suggested he eat heartily. Kella thought he couldn't allow anyone to discover what had transpired, that he was now in this body. For the moment, he had to endure. When he started eating, he realized that the food was poisoned again. Tarm, with a faint smile, commented that he had prepared a special soup for him and asked if it tasted good. Kella replied yes, but inwardly, he seethed with rage. He concluded that these damned demons were not his family, they were his adversaries. This situation could not persist for long, he needed to take action. He had always aspired to achieve something, to complete something grand. He was the foremost map designer in the Dungeon Craft game, yet in his previous life, he had been perpetually humiliated and never possessed the strength to resist. He never wanted to die as uselessly as he had before. His internal anger surged so intensely that, without a second thought, he seized the poisoned soup and flung it directly into Seldera's face, telling her that she should sample it too. Then, wishing to return the small gift she had given him, he threw the knife that was embedded in his leg, striking Tarm in the shoulder. He then turned to the Demon King and questioned if it wasn't time to bring an end to these happy family meals. In a fit of fury, he overturned the table and declared that from that point forward, everyone should dine in solitude. Everyone present was shocked by his sheer audacity. Kella angrily thought that he now wanted to see how that collection of demons would react. Later, he felt a sense of satisfaction, having done what he intended. But naturally, after that display, he was trampled to death by his own father. However, he recovered in a surprisingly brief period and felt a strange, potent force welling up within him. Now he knew he truly was the son of the Demon King, and what he most desired to discover now was the potential strength of that ability. Run warned him that it was almost time for the demon power lesson and that he needed to get to the hall quickly. But Kella dismissively told her to quiet down, stating he already knew. Run was surprised, wondering since when he behaved in such a harsh and decisive manner. Kella reflected that, according to the memories residing in his original body, that lesson on demonic power had been one of the worst experiences the previous Kella had ever had. But even so, there was no reason for him to skip participating in the training hall. The instructor announced that Lady Seldera and Lord Tarm would not be attending the class that day, so only the rest of the royal children would be tested. Kella looked at the others and recognized their faces from his memories of the old Kella. He remembered how terrified the previous occupant of this body used to be just by being intimidated by them, and he knew that these demons exploited every weakness to beat him, humiliate him, and laugh about it afterward. Seldera used to watch as he was tormented, claiming they were being too lenient on him, and as she held authority in the location, the others obeyed her orders and intensified their assault. Kella recalled that the original Kella constantly thought he didn't want to fight, and he also felt that the original body possessed too soft a heart, it was weak. But now, everything was different. Kanchi was in control, and he decided he would utilize his strength appropriately. The instructor inquired about the last duel from the previous class. One of the bullies stepped forward, stating it had been against him and Kella, or rather, Sir Kella, in a mocking tone. Kella immediately felt his anger rise. The instructor agreed to another duel between them. The bully smiled and asked if Kella was ready, while the other students were already whispering that he would be beaten nearly to death again. Some even laughed, saying not to make the young master cry publicly. Kella thought he didn't know what was more annoying, the mocking voices surrounding him or that idiot standing before him. Kanchi then reflected that he and the old Kella were quite similar in many respects. In his past life, he lacked both strength and financial means, he was perpetually underestimated and humiliated. But that had changed. He concentrated his energy, and everyone around him was terrified by the pressure he was emitting. They questioned one another, wondering when he had acquired such a vast amount of mana, and the boy facing him could barely move, utterly paralyzed by fear. Kella announced he would take it easy, stating he would only throw one punch. But when he landed the blow, he simply slammed the demon's face into the ground with such force that it appeared as though a piece of refuse was being discarded. Everyone nearby was in shock. Rude, the bully, couldn't even react. The instructor was incredulous at what he had just witnessed. Poor Rude was left toothless, with a black eye, and unable to speak properly. And Kella coldly asked him what he had said earlier, questioning how he had dared to address the son of the Demon King in that manner. Rude, still crestfallen, apologized to Sir Kella. Kella replied that Rude had better not make any errors in his presence again, or he wouldn't survive the next encounter. Everyone was terrified, wondering what had happened to him, as this was unequivocally not the same Kella as before. He then addressed the instructor, who was already trembling simply at hearing his name mentioned, and asked if the class would proceed as normal. The instructor quickly affirmed, yes, of course. And Ren watched in silence, concluding that Kella was undeniably behaving strangely. The Demon King was also observing the class, watching everything closely. Later, in the Demon Castle, Caldera was in the recovery tub, her body covered in wounds, complaining about the audacity of that bastard throwing a poison potion in her face. Tarm, beside her, asked her to calm down and focus on her recovery, reminding her that she didn't possess the same regenerative powers as Kella. Caldera commented that this was also peculiar, as it didn't make sense that Kella alone had such advanced regeneration. Tarm then said it seemed Kella had undergone some kind of transformation or a very profound change, as he was now completely different. It was at that moment that Tarm realized that even their father seemed pleased with Kella's actions, remarking that it was the first time he had genuinely seen his father smile. Seldora replied that she highly doubted the smile was meant for Kella. But Tom insisted it wasn't normal and that something was clearly out of the ordinary. Seldora asked exactly what he meant by that, and he replied that perhaps she would rather die than ally herself with Kella, but they could at least cease fighting for a while to observe him together. Caldera agreed that it wasn't a terrible idea but made it clear that if he made any false move, he would be the first to die, even before he could catch their father's attention again. Meanwhile, Kella was participating in a class where the instructor was displaying a sort of magical hologram showing the image of the last demon king, Turhal Callan. Turhal had a completely insane and psychotic expression, which led Kella to think he truly looked demonic. The instructor explained that Turhal had been the most powerful of his time but ultimately perished due to a cowardly scheme, betrayed by the Celestial Guild and other opportunistic guilds who took advantage of the situation to seize a portion of the demon kingdom. Kella recognized this as part of the memories he now held, recalling that these guilds had surrounded the kingdom. The instructor also commented that because of these cursed guilds, the current demon king was barely able to leave the castle, which was why he was confined inside, practically imprisoned. The instructor also stated that the Celestial Guild, the largest since its founding, had prepared an attack on the demon kingdom, so the students had to work diligently in combat classes if they wished to assist the king in ridding themselves of these enemies. All the students then collectively recited an oath to fight for the honor of the demons. Later, Kella was alone, observing the horizon and contemplating what he should do, as he felt that if he remained there any longer, he could end up dying at any moment. So he asked Rin if her father was going to be absent for 3 days, and she confirmed that he was. Kella asked her if she was aware that the castle had a weakness, perhaps an architectural map they could utilize to their advantage in combat. He commented that the enemies were using the neglected surrounding territories to assault the castle, but he would use this next expedition as an opportunity to map the entire region. He would then present everything to his father so he could destroy each and every one of the enemies. Kella decided that this would now be his purpose. He also mentioned his intention to create a dungeon, which would be distinct from ordinary reality, allowing him to draw the map himself exactly as he desired. Therefore, he ordered Run to immediately construct a secret office in the basement of the castle. When she inquired precisely what this office would be for, Kella replied that he needed a place to work in secret, somewhere his father would not know about. Meanwhile, in the Demon King's personal recovery tub, he was silently reflecting that he could no longer afford to ignore Kella before it was too late. He felt the need to confirm something with his son directly. Later, Kella arrived in the basement and asked if that was the office he had requested, as it looked a mess. Ren explained that because it was secret, it was the best she could manage. Kella commented that perhaps next time she could be a little more meticulous. Ren inwardly thought that lately, Kella had been treating her with a bit more strictness, which unexpectedly seemed effective. She also thought that Kella had been intimidating recently because he wasn't the same boy as before. Even so, she couldn't help but feel drawn to him now because he was starting to appear more like a mature individual. Then, Kella looked at Ren and asked why she was still standing there, ordering her to fetch some coffee immediately. Ren hurried to comply with the command, repeating coffee, coffee, while trying to understand exactly what it was, as she had never heard of it. As she disappeared through the castle in confusion, Kella thought he was finally alone and could now calmly analyze the map. He noticed that the Demon King's castle was located in the worst possible defensive position. So he decided he would create a new map on his own, based on his memories and experiences. Meanwhile, Ren was still running through the corridors, unsure of what to search for, when she encountered the Demon King himself approaching. He asked what she was doing in the basement without Kella and demanded to know where his son was and what he was currently doing. Ren felt nervous, recalling Kella's request to keep it a secret, but the king insisted she answer. While she hesitated, Kella was occupied creating his new map, deriving great enjoyment from the process because it strongly reminded him of the dungeoncraft game he had cherished so much in his previous life. For him, creating maps was the most effective way to concentrate and have fun, something he had always been passionate about. Suddenly, the door was violently kicked in, and the Demon King himself burst in, furious to discover that his son had established a secret office without his knowledge. Kella barely had time to react before he was struck directly by his father's fist, which pierced through his stomach with brutal force. The king stated that if Kella truly wished to assist him, he shouldn't conceal anything. Kella could barely manage to reply, merely spitting up blood as he tried to remain conscious. He thought that the pain he was experiencing now was far more intense than anything his brothers had ever felt and believed that he might genuinely die in that moment. But then, still bleeding, Kella held out the map to his father and explained that he was mapping the entire region around the castle, marking the weak points and the locations most vulnerable to attacks by enemy guilds. He said he was drawing the entire geography of the area in detail to aid in future battles. The Demon King looked at the map and slowly withdrew his fist from Kella's body, allowing him to breathe a little. He then asked why Kella had done all this in secret. Kella explained that if he had announced the plan before finishing it, he feared his father wouldn't permit it. So he decided to show the map only after it was completed because, as the son of the Demon King, he wanted to contribute to the complete destruction of the Celestial Guild. The two of them stared at each other intensely for several seconds. Ron, who was witnessing everything, could hardly believe that Kella was speaking to his own father in such a manner. The Demon King then asked how long he would need to finish the plan, a direct question that surprised Kella even though he was wounded. Kella replied that 5 would be sufficient. The king asked if he meant 5 days. Kella, still panting, explained that he meant 5 hours, which puzzled the Demon King. Kella said that in that time, they could complete all the necessary construction for defense and counterattack, and that he himself wanted to be in charge of the operation. The Demon King looked at his son in amazement, finding it hard to believe that this determined boy was truly his heir. He said it was acceptable, that the plan sounded promising, but cautioned that if Kella was merely attempting to impress him with empty words, he would destroy the map and then destroy his own son too. Kella replied that he understood perfectly and thought that he had finally managed to prove his worth, even if at that moment he was still vomiting blood and questioning if his father was truly trying to kill him. Run, on the other hand, thought that Kella had now successfully convinced the Demon King, and this only deepened her fascination with him. She then remembered that she had to get him to the infirmary as quickly as possible. Later, having recovered somewhat, Kella managed to finalize the map in just 5 hours, exactly as he had promised. Immediately, the forces of the demonic castle began implementing the plan. Mages started preparing magical illusion barriers around the construction areas so that the enemy guilds wouldn't notice anything. They also began modifying the very geography of the land using magic to shape everything according to Kella's new blueprint. Kella thought that now, with his new map made as if it were within a game, everything was finally proceeding according to his original strategy. Meanwhile, in the Celestial Guild camp, Merson, the guild master, was profoundly shocked upon receiving an urgent message. He inquired if the demons were genuinely altering the terrain around the castle, and one of his subordinates confirmed this, reporting that the enemies had discovered and activated an illusion spell. Merson was worried, as he had no comprehension of what those demons could accomplish with that type of magic. The messenger then asked if they should attack immediately to interrupt this plan. But Merson refused, as he believed these enemy actions would have no impact. He explained that in merely 3 days, the guild's most formidable squadron would be complete and ready to act, as Talcan's squadron was already en route. Talcan had begun forming this elite unit approximately 12 years prior, and its composition was now finally complete. Merson stated with confidence that this squadron would not lose to anyone and guaranteed that this time, the Demon King would be utterly defeated. According to his calculations, Talcan would arrive at the castle in 2 days, and the knights accompanying him were resolute in their determination to kill the Demon King and permanently end the reign of his bloodline. They were prepared to burn down the castle and eliminate all its inhabitants. Among the squadron members, a red-haired woman observed General Killman's arrival and commented on his capability. She was Commander Shreels. When one of the knights asked if they could triumph this time, she replied with conviction that they could. Shreels stated that Talcan's squadron was distinct from all other guilds and that they were now certain they would slay the Demon King without any doubt. Concurrently, the Demon King himself was seated on his throne, reflecting on the map his son had prepared. He thought that Kella was genuinely not bluffing, as the plan made strategic sense. Although the map wasn't flawless, his son's effort astonished him, and he recognized that Kella's body had been pushed to its absolute limit to complete it within the time frame. The king knew he couldn't act impulsively, so he decided to await the opportune moment. The next day would be the final day before the guild's offensive, and he knew he had to conclude the conflict against the Celestials then. At that moment, the demon mages and constructors were diligently working, reshaping the ground and finalizing the preparations. Kella observed the progress and thought that everything was unfolding precisely as he had planned. For him, this was far more challenging than setting up maps in games, because now he could literally shape the real world to his liking. His sole duty now was to wait for the battle to commence. And finally, the crucial day arrived. On the field of the Celestial Guild, Talcan was already assembled with his full squadron and stood before Merson, stating that the time had come to eliminate the Demon King. Merson immediately authorized the advance, confident that they were fully prepared for victory. Talcan was completely motivated and determined. But suddenly, something fell from the sky directly in front of the group. It looked like a small point of magical light that quickly materialized. The commander quickly recognized it as a trap, but it was too late. An explosion occurred at point-blank range, impacting everyone present. Despite the intensity of the attack, both sides managed to react in time, resulting in no initial casualties. But what appeared to be a simple explosion was actually the Demon King himself materializing there in front of everyone. Hours earlier, he had listened to an explanation from his son, Kella, who had told him that he had deactivated an ancient magical barrier that screened all use of magic within demon territory. Now, with this barrier inactive, the Demon King could use his teleportation ability freely, undetected by his enemies. When the king asked if he could teleport directly to the enemy camp, Seldora replied that such an act was crazy, as it meant throwing himself alone into the middle of his enemy's base. Tarm also cautioned that it was too dangerous, even for him. Hel, referring to the Demon King, another of those present, asked if they were doubting the Demon King's power, and the two immediately denied it, stating their concern wasn't about his strength but the fact that he still hadn't fully recovered from his injuries. Even so, the king ordered everyone to be quiet and stated that he had already made his final decision. And now, in the present, the Demon King stood there in front of the Celestial Guild squad with the sole aim of killing them all. He had gathered such an immense amount of mana around him that the entire area was seized by an unbearable pressure, causing even the strongest warriors to start sweating and retreat. Even so, Talcan didn't hesitate, as he was determined to put an end to the Demon King. He and his companions, full of courage, advanced together for the confrontation. But the king's power was devastating, and as soon as the fight began, a battle of total destruction gripped the field. Meanwhile, Kella was atop the Demon Castle Tower, watching everything carefully and concentrating the remaining forces. He declared that all their preparations were complete and ordered the army to advance against the enemy guild immediately. All the troops set off, directing their efforts towards reaching the center of the field where the Demon King was already engaging the enemy. Monstrous creatures emerged from underground as part of the ambush plan, attacking the warriors of the Celestial Guild from all sides, which led Kella to think that everything was unfolding according to plan, and that was excellent. But then, from behind him, Seldora and Tarm approached. Seldora, in a cold tone, stated that she still didn't understand how Kella had managed to do all that, but added that not everything was turning out as he had imagined. Tarm, standing directly beside him, commented that, regrettably, Kella had overstepped his bounds and thus could no longer remain there. Kella didn't appear to have anticipated this betrayal, and before he could react, Tarm attacked him directly in the stomach with his weapon, saying that this was the perfect moment for Caldera to finish him off. Without hesitation, Caldera rushed forward and severed Kella's head with a precise blow. The two laughed as they watched his body fall, remarking that without his head, not even Kella's power of regeneration would function. As his head was thrown to the ground, Kella was still thinking that perhaps this truly was the end of his life. The body fell hard, and the head rolled to the edge of the tower. Caldera then approached and commented that they had finally succeeded in cutting off the head of that wretch. Tarm said it was time for them to go and assist their father on the front line. But surprisingly, Caldera betrayed her own brother by piercing his back with a hidden dagger. Tarm, though wounded, didn't fall immediately and recognized that Caldera was using a forbidden weapon belonging to their mother, a weapon that neither of them should wield. Caldera replied that she was a demon and disregarded rules, because weapons were made to be used. Tarm asked if she was truly taking it so seriously, and Caldera stated that if she killed him there, she would become the sole legitimate successor to the throne. Enraged, Tarm advanced against her, and Caldera swore that she would finish him off quickly. So the two began to clash violently at the top of the tower. Meanwhile, Kella was still alive, though in complete disbelief, wondering how the demons themselves could be so cruel as to betray and kill without hesitation. He had never imagined that his end would come like this. But then, the ground beneath his body broke, and Ren emerged from inside a secret tunnel, trembling with fear but determined. She picked up Kella's head and connected it back to his body while trying to control her despair. On the battlefield, demonic portals were opening on all sides, and the coordinated attacks made it clear that the demons already possessed prior knowledge of the human strategies. The Celestial Guild was completely overwhelmed, not knowing how to react to the onslaught of monsters and the magical forces of their enemies. It was then that the talking dragon came roaring out, destroying everything in its path with fire and fury, and shot directly at the Demon King with a devastating attack. But the king didn't hesitate. He launched himself at the dragon in the air, grabbed its neck tightly, and ripped its head off in a single motion, throwing the remains of the creature to the ground as if it were nothing. Talcan, the squadron commander, seeing this horrific scene, was terrified and shouted for everyone to fire immediately at the Demon King. But while they were attempting to organize an attack, the demon army continued to advance, and among them was Hel, the Demon King, standing calmly, observing everything with his arms crossed. The commander asked if they had managed to strike Hel, but soon realized that something was wrong. Hel's body began to transform in front of everyone, assuming an imposing and frightening form. He was activating his most powerful state. The members of the Celestial Guild were paralyzed with fear, and the commander commented that this was precisely as the ancient books described. Shreels confirmed it, stating that this was the Demon King's final form. Even with Shreels' shouts of command to stay focused and not succumb to fear, it was clear that the warriors were completely shaken. The Demon King's overwhelming aura weighed down on all of them, and even Commander Talcan could barely move, whether because of fear or the unbearable pressure of that infernal energy. The Demon King thought, as he observed everything around him, that the sole weak point in Kella's plan was the fact that even though he had gathered all their forces in the center of the enemy base, there was no guaranteed escape route. Still, that wouldn't make him retreat, as he was the Demon King and was unconcerned by the idea of being in a place with no way out. However, Kella had already considered this in advance. Although this detail remained insignificant to the Demon King at that moment, what truly mattered now was the extermination of all humans. Hell began to gather even more mana around his body, generating an energy so dense that it could be felt throughout the region. The severely wounded Commander Talcan shouted that he would give his utmost in his final form and that everyone should be ready to sacrifice their lives, as it was the only way to stop the Demon King from annihilating the entire guild. When Hell fully activated his final form, the power emanating was so colossal that it could be seen even from the horizon beyond the walls of the Demon Castle. Meanwhile, in the underground tunnels, Run was still desperately trying to reconnect Kella's head to his body. Trembling and tearful, she kept repeating that it had to work, begging for it to succeed. She remembered a time when Kella's arm was ripped off, and even though she was disgusted and scared, she simply listened when he told her to reattach it. So that's exactly what she did on that occasion, and to her surprise, his arm regenerated perfectly shortly afterwards. Now, the challenge was even greater, as she needed to test whether it would also work on his head. Ren hesitated, saying that it could be much more dangerous, but proceeded cautiously, still frightened. A few moments later, the experiment was a success, and his body began to respond. With that, Kella quickly put his plan into action, asking Ren to find Seldara's servant and tell her exactly what he had instructed. Later, Rin found Seldara's servant and, following Kella's instructions, said that he intended to kill Seldara during the battle, taking advantage of the moment when the Demon King was busy facing the guild's warriors. Seldara's servant was surprised and asked how he planned to do this. Ren said that it would be the perfect chance for Caldera to sever Kella's head, as that way he would surely die, since his regeneration didn't work if his head was separated from his body. In the present, as Rin watched Kella's body lying motionless, his head newly reconnected, she trembled with fear and thought that everything was happening exactly as Kella had planned, but she still felt terrified that he had genuinely died. It was at that moment that Kella opened his eyes and, with an annoyed look on his face, asked her who she was calling an idiot. Ron was completely surprised to see him awake, as she hadn't thought he would survive this time. She realized that his regeneration was significantly weakened when he was struck by weapons imbued with mana, like Seldara's dagger. But it still didn't matter, the important thing was that he had survived and his plan was still viable. Ron was so moved that she ran over and hugged him tightly, saying that she truly thought he had died. Kella couldn't react, blushing completely, and didn't understand why she was doing it. Awkwardly, he slowly pushed her away and said that he would continue with the plan since he had survived. At that moment, he began to dissolve the contract that existed between him and Ren, releasing her from her obligations as a servant. Ren was shocked by this action, as she was now free to live her life as she wished. But she still decided to follow him. She remembered a time when they were little and how she had promised that one day she would be his friend instead of just a servant. That memory made Ren even more emotional, and even in the face of her newly granted freedom, she declared that she wanted to remain by Kella's side because she would go anywhere with him, as long as she wasn't left behind. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, Talcan, the commander, was badly wounded, his body covered in cuts and burns. He watched the Demon King standing there, even without one of his arms, still resisting like an unstoppable monster. For the commander, this was the true Demon King, a living catastrophe that no human could contain, no matter how powerful their attacks or strategies. The Demon King remained silent, observing the battlefield and thought that almost all the enemies were already dead. At the same time, he realized that there were no more of his own soldiers around him either. The confrontation had reached its limit, with both sides devastated, and everything now depended on the few who were still standing. Then he thought of his children and was afraid that they wouldn't make it in time. But he soon realized that he shouldn't be disappointed, as this battle had always been his alone, and decided that he would use every last drop of mana left in his body to fight until the end.